Good afternoon, guys. Thank you for carving out the time to enlighten our audience. I have to say, this is my third and final panel, and this is the one I am most excited about. I'm looking forward to just having fun with this one. So I guess my first question for you guys is, the theme is really around artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is transforming every industry in myriad ways. For what you're doing around dating and sex, how would you say artificial intelligence is transforming your businesses and the experiences for customers?
Well, to start, from eHarmony's standpoint, I would say that the whole business is predicated on the idea of machine learning and bringing people together for reasons that we are able to discern and based on algorithms of research. So from the very beginning, which at this point is 18 years ago, we have been using this kind of technology to bring people together. It's the core of what we do. So it helps, of course, because otherwise you don't have a very good way of knowing who you're going to work with in the long term from our perspective. But there are other sort of ancillary effects, which are just the choice that continues to mount, right? There's always someone new to meet. And so it's a hard thing to manage, and I think that we're all seeing that we're having to learn how to deal with that. The choice is good. The choice is good because that's what you need to find the right partner, but it's a temptation that makes it very hard to stop looking.
For Polly and Stephanie, I feel like the businesses, you specialize in are really like once you have a partner, once you found a partner. Talk about how artificial intelligence is benefiting the business aspect, but also the experience for your end customers.
Yeah, I mean, so it's funny. Weirdly enough, the last startup I was at was a Y Combinator dating startup, and I think artificial intelligence had a huge role in how we were able to scale and match people. I would actually say our products are increasingly, the majority of our customers are actually single women, and I think that there are the technological innovations that allow for better products, but I also think the number one hurdle we face is even if that technology exists, how do you tackle the cultural stigma and how do you get society to view sexuality differently? And I do think that AI can help with that. For the most part, one of the main questions I think we get asked a lot is, when are the sex robots coming? And my answer, more often than not, is not anytime soon. And I think a lot of that does go back to just cultural realities. But I would love to hear what Stephanie thinks of it as well.
Yeah, I don't think I'm on. Oh, there we go. When it comes to AI and sex, I look around at the market and I don't think anything is kind of happening now that really gets me excited. I think what I'm excited about is potential future uses of AI when it comes to learning people's preferences, for example, or helping people connect in ways that they hadn't thought about before. I think that we're at this stage where AI is still such a big buzzword, but when it comes to sex, like Polly, I'm more concerned about some of the inputs we'll be putting in and how society is talking about. And if you're going to create an AI product, who's your team behind? And make sure you have a really diverse team and you're answering all the questions. And we're having so many issues with society that I don't think we're ready to think about things like sex robots.
Can we talk about, you mentioned cultural stigma, and I think you bring up a very, very good point. I think everyone here on the stage, that your businesses have to combat cultural stigma in one way, shape, or form. Online dating, even though a significant number of couples, for example, meet online, there is still strangely in 2018 a stigma about dating online, or I met my partner, significant other, or casual friend online. Let's get real. And then Polly and Stephanie, you mentioned the cultural stigma, around your own businesses. How do you, the education aspect, can you talk about that and how you potentially educate customers or users or new customers and users around that?
Well, we find, if you think about the past, everybody who met online and married or had a serious relationship had a lie handy to explain to the world because they didn't want to admit that they met someone online. And now if you open the New York Times marriage announcement section and you just look at all the couples, they all say where they met. So I think that's a pretty big victory for our industry in terms of getting acceptance. So I feel like we've made a lot of progress.
Does eHarmony keep track of the number of couples who have met and then married from the site?
We do.
How many couples do you know?
It's about 2 million people.
2 million. Okay.
So we've been at this a long time, about 18 years. The company's been around, and a lot of those couples, of course, have had children, and we love to track those relationships and see how they're doing, and it's a point of pride, I think, for the business.
Got it. And then for Polly and Stephanie, around cultural stigma, can you talk more about the challenges around that? I mean, let's be 100% honest. It's like everyone. I would like to think the majority of people in the audience and watching have a healthy sex life, whether it's solo or couples or more. But how do you overcome that stigma? Is it changing and evolving, and how so?
I think education, like you said, is a huge part of it. I know a big part of our kind of marketing campaign and doing events like this is coming and speaking about sex and talking about it in a very open, honest way, like it should be. I think sex has been such a huge stigma for so long, especially for women. And education and pleasure are the antidote to all of the shame that many people still feel across the world when it comes to their sexuality and their sex lives. So yeah, it's a huge part of our marketing effort, and it's a massive part of what we try to do.
I also think it's just having more women in the industry who I think are designing a next generation of product that isn't necessarily phallic, and that maybe the marketing is a bit more elevated and it's not objectifying women. And I also think it's the price point. I think it's making these products much more accessible by being able to sell direct to consumer online. And Warby Parker, Casper, all these companies championed this model in the early, I guess, mid-2000s. And I think that it's finally now hitting our industry as well. And so by making it accessible from a design perspective and a price perspective, we're just seeing a better quality of product, which helps contribute to tearing down those stigmas.
When you talk about going the Warby Parker route, basically going to direct to consumer, how much of a profit how much cheaper or more inexpensive can products become for customers?
Well, on average, it varies by industry. In our industry, which is sexual wellness products, distributors take about 40% of the margin. And so you're able to deliver that value directly to the customer. But it's hard because we also can't advertise on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat. So you want to sell direct to consumer, but it's hard when you have very limited channels you're allowed to reach that consumer through. And I know dating, I think, has similar restrictions.
Well, I was going to say, I think it's interesting. There's a continuum of acceptance. Like I can remember in 2002 when we talked to a credit card processing company, they said, oh, you guys are the same as pornography, so you're going to pay a vastly higher credit card rate.
You said you were the same as pornography?
Yeah, and you sit down across from this banker and you explain your business, but they don't understand it. Society's just not to a place where it understands that it was a viable, normal kind of product. And of course, now, 15 years later, that's completely changed, and it's very acceptable. And I think you're going to see the exact same thing as it becomes more and more typical and normal. Attitudes will change, and advertising opportunities will open up. It'll be a different world.
I think it's interesting you bring up pornography, and in terms of AI, I think this is one of the areas which I'm quite fascinated by, in the sense that AI is only as good as the data that you put in, right? And yet you still have this humongous industry that is focused at a very tiny percentage of the population in terms of the content that it's making and who it feels its customer is. And so when you're looking at how they're using big data and how they're trying to understand, for example, what people are watching, at which point in the video do they stop, have they finished? All of that data is input into this model, and it's coming out with all of these statistics that some people release every year, and yet you don't think about how this whole industry is geared towards one part of the population and doesn't take into account so many other people. And the AI that they're already developing to figure out what content to produce next, who they should be using in their films, is all based around that very niche or like very targeted and somewhat misogynistic industry still.
Can we talk more about big data for a second and the learnings that each of you have from your customers? Grant, from your end, can you talk more about what you're learning from eHarmony's customers in aggregate?
One more time?
Yeah, what you're learning from eHarmony customers in aggregate trends or patterns based on big data.
Well, that is a huge topic, of course. I think people feel that the online dating business has moved in a very transactional direction. That is what our customers are telling us. Transactional, shallow, relationships that are sort of, let's use the word, very casual.
Right.
And the people that want a more meaningful relationship are the people that we talk to, right? I think I'm often asked about the Tinder effect in our industry, and if you think back 6, 7, 8 years, 20-somethings did not online date. They didn't need to, in their eyes. They were out in bars meeting people the way that folks have met forever. And Tinder brought those people into the marketplace. And I think that's been a tremendous boost to us because, of course, some people do not like that experience, or they maybe want something a little more meaningful, and we catch the benefit of that. So if there's one trend that I could speak to, I think that's it. Of course, we are a certain kind of business, and we have a reputation, and we get people who are looking for a certain kind of experience, but that has only gotten stronger over the recent years. Yeah.
Holly, what are you seeing on your end in terms of user data and what they're wanting and how they're engaging?
Yeah, at least in the United States, I think if there is a silver lining to Donald Trump getting elected, it's been that there's been this massive intersectional feminist movement, and we find our customers who once would probably feel very scared to share data as personal as your sexual data now offer it up willingly. And I think it comes from a values perspective, and I think we came out as very politically against Donald Trump, and that was a really scary thing to do as a brand because historically brands are not supposed to be political. And when we did it, we found that we were speaking to a group of women who feel like they haven't been spoken to in a very long time, and as a result of that, they share their data about, you know, the incredible number of women who struggle to have an orgasm and don't talk about it. And I think that there needs to be more data and research behind sexual health because it's stigmatized. There's just a dearth of information available that's like credible research.
And so much lack of funding when it comes to that research too. No one's funding it. So there are some incredible researchers within our field who just don't have the funding available to them to be able to do some of the very core basic bits of research that haven't been done.
Do you think there is that shift happening in terms of more studies potentially happening around sexual health and wellness?
I think so. I hope so. And I think that our industry can definitely contribute to that. One of the things that I'm super excited about is some of that big data in terms of for me, it's in how you connect the body with the environment. And so in terms of creating an experience for someone, a couple in the bedroom, the majority of our customers are couples who have been in a relationship for a long time. I think you could use big data in some very interesting ways to help them connect with each other. And I think, I don't know if I speak for other people on the panel, but I think technology is such a great tool, but ultimately it should be working in the background. You should be we feel that you should be creating technology that helps to enhance and elevate people's sex lives, but it's not really, really obvious. Everything just works. And so some of the ideas that we have around big data and understanding how people interact with each other and how two people, and if, for example, I use pornography, in couples, very, very often the couple will not enjoy the same types of pornography. You'll have one person who really enjoys one specific kind, another person who might enjoys similar things but gets really turned off by other things. So how can you use big data to figure out compromises and help people connect and maybe watch something that they can both enjoy instead of being turned off by small things?
Are solutions being offered around that, the idea of being able to bridge that chasm?
Not at the moment. Not at the moment. I just think we don't have enough data.
Got it. Fair enough. What, if any, negatives would you say are there around artificial intelligence and machine learning as it pertains to dating and sexual well-being? Are there any downsides?
I think there's a lot of downsides, and I think that the problem is that every week an engineer comes into my office and says, I think we can do this. We should do this. We've discovered how to do this. And my role oftentimes is to say, yes, but is that really going to help people fall in love? And the answer is typically no. And so the problem with technology is that you think because you can that you should. And I think that it takes a lot of maturity to say, yeah, I don't think we should do that because it isn't really helpful to people. The other thing I would say, which is a big temptation in our business, unlike almost every other business, if we do a great job for a customer, they leave. If I had an airline and I did a great job for you, you could fly until you can't walk anymore, and then I could send a wheelchair for you, right? So there's a temptation in our business to gamify the process so that you think you're having some kind of success, but you don't ever leave. And I have seen this, and from a business standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. But of course, that's not what we're there to do. We're there to help people fall in love and meet people, and we have to stand firmly against the temptations that come from a business perspective.
Paula, you were shaking your head in agreement a few seconds ago.
Oh, because I totally agree. I agree in the sense that, you know, the whole thing around just because you can doesn't mean you necessarily should. And I think that, you know, there is a lot of feature development, which at times I really question why. You know, I think in our industry specifically, this whole thing around sex robots and, you know, it's such a false notion to be afraid of them and to think that they're like around the corner. And I think that with AI and automation, we have to be really careful about writing those algorithms because innately there has to be an intuitive human touch always. Like that subjective will always exist. And rules-based logic is amazing and it's efficient, but we also have to ensure, like in the last 10 years, the ability for millennials and Gen Z to display authentic signs of empathy has decreased 60%.
Can you say that one more time, Paula?
So for millennials and Gen Z, the generations that have grown up on screens, right, our ability to empathize has decreased 60% in the last 10 years. So that's making eye contact, being able to read someone's body language.
Is that simply because, frankly, they are now wired and tethered to their devices? They are perhaps less empathic, or they have less EQ?
Yeah, I mean, 96% of Gen Z thinks that online bullying is a serious problem, which is to say that we have to embed empathy into AI and into technology, because when we can't look people in the face and have a discussion, even if we disagree, that's a huge problem. And I think we're seeing it play out in the United States with how polarized our country is.
Can you talk about what's next for each of your businesses? Stephanie, from Mystery Vibe, can you talk more about that?
Yeah, sure. So our flagship product, Crescendo, we released about 2 years ago now, and we spent the last 2 years working on our next product, which is a wearable vibrator for people with penises and men. So I'm working super hard right now trying to open up conversations around men and sexuality, which is still also an incredibly stigma and taboo topic. So we're super focused right now on getting that product out.
When you say men and sexuality, can you clarify what you mean by that?
Yeah, so for example, some of the huge myths that we're trying to bust, one of the things that drives me crazy is the concept of the female orgasm as something very mysterious and unreachable and very hard to find, whereas the concept of the male orgasm is it's very simple and very animalistic. And both of those things are not true. There are as many sexualities as there are people on the planet. It's not that simple. And actually, diving deep into some of the shame that many men feel around things like masturbation is a huge topic, and one that there are so many things that I think we need to bring to light and have more conversations about.
Holly, what about for Unbound Babes?
Yeah, so we make about 75 products on our website that we sell direct to consumer. We just got second place at TechCrunch Disrupt, which was huge because it was the first time a sexual wellness company has ever been allowed to pitch, much less come in second place. And it was for this ring, which is a vibrator. So yeah, I'm just really excited to build cool products that look beautiful, are affordable, and hopefully, you know, smash the patriarchy to little itty bitty pieces.
Nice.
I think the problem that we are trying to solve, I don't know how many people out there online date, but there's a little thing called ghosting. You know, texting has been the worst thing to happen to dating in the last 10 years. And so there is a lot of activity on dating apps, but by and large, there's not a lot of dates. And we have some ideas about how we can help people actually have that old-fashioned date where they go someplace and sit across a table and talk to each other. We think that's really what people want. That's what they tell us they want, and that they're not getting. So that's priority number one for us.
So you're working on a potential ghosting solution? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I guess I would call it like a date bot. Some machine learning that helps people who are starting to talk actually go on a date. And the fact is, a lot of the people on eHarmony got married when they were 25 and now they're 40 and they're divorced and they never dated much and they don't know how to date. Guys don't know how to ask. It's astounding, really, how many people just need help, and we think we can do that in an automated way. Of course, there's the creepiness factor you have to manage, but we think it's very doable.
Right. Well, Polly, Grant, Stephanie, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, afternoon. Great.